Hi, everyone. From Rolling Hills Covenant Church, this is No Dumb Questions, where we get to explore the questions you've always wanted to ask, because every question is worth asking. My name is Nick Dethlefson, and I'll be the host for today, and I'm joined by Kyle, our junior high pastor, and Connor, our high school pastor. Today, our topic is video games. Are video games inherently sinful? Should Christians play them? How can we interact with them? Before we jump into the discussion, I wanted to read off some facts about the video game industry, just to kind of get a grasp of the scale of the games industry. And to compare it to something, I feel like comparing it to the movie industry would be helpful for people. So in 2024, just so you get a rough idea, the movie industry made around $31.5 billion, which is a lot. You think of all your Marvel movies, the big budget, whatever, hundreds of millions of dollars, all the small movies, every single movie released. That's a rough approximation in the entire world. Also in 2024, the video games industry made about $184 billion. So if you were to compare the two, yeah, it's crazy. Like you don't really, you don't think about it. But you see those numbers. So the movie industry comprised roughly 17% of what the video game industry's revenue is, which is insane. And a couple other statistics that were interesting was that 50% of video games were mobile gaming. So people on your phone playing games. Just to contextualize it a little bit, if you're listening or watching at home, if you're playing Candy Crush, that's, you're a gamer included in that.
Or Sudoku.
Yeah, exactly.
Sudoku. Yeah.
Not just if you have a console or a computer or something to play. Video games are most popular, 80% playing between the ages of 16 and 24, which is probably fairly intuitive to reason that younger people are playing more games. But interestingly enough, the ages from 35 to 44 report roughly 65% of people are playing video games in some way. So just to contextualize a little bit of our conversation, video games are very widespread. They're kind of everywhere. They're not going away anytime soon. So we can get into how we should think about them as Christians. So Connor, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, one of the problems is what you just described, that like mobile games are put next to like console games, which are two very different categories of video games. But so maybe what would be best is if we just kind of throw out some categories in which we can see both pros and cons to video games. Because what it comes down to, I think, is we can't just put a clean stamp on like all video games are sinful, or all. And maybe we could, or maybe someone could try, and we could argue with them, and it'd be fun. But yeah, so if you clicked on this video looking for the answer of like, are video games sinful? Yes or no? I'm sorry on the front end, but stick around. That we can't give you an answer, but stick around, and hopefully there'll be some good things to draw out of that. So maybe some categories within video games that we can point at and see some good or maybe some negatives. I think one aspect of video games is their ability to tell stories. So I guess if you look back to where video games started, maybe you can point at like Pong and say that like there's no story there. But from even early inception of video games, the idea of like telling a story or an adventure, it came in pretty early.
Yeah.
And in this way, we can kind of put it next to movies, and we can put it next to books and say like it's similar because you're walking through a story, you're seeing environment, setting, rising action, conflict, climax, resolution. This sort of story arc.
Yeah.
So maybe we can think of some positives to the idea that video games express story. Do you guys have any pros of this? Like, what are the benefits of video games as a media which tells a story?
Yeah, I think specifically like video games are super unique compared to films, watching movies, because as a moviegoer, you're a captive audience for like 2 hours or whatever. You can't make any decisions. You can get up and leave if you really want to, but you're being there watching the movie is not going to affect the movie at all. You're just a bystander. Whereas in video games, you're oftentimes in control of at least the character, somewhat kind of shaping where the story goes. Some games explore that differently than others, where they kind of force you to go one way, but other games maybe give you a couple different options to think through. And it's an interesting way to kind of tell the story where you're giving creative freedom to the player, but then they can also experience the consequences of their actions too. If they decide to do something maybe morally reprehensible, they get in trouble for it. Or if they do something good, they're rewarded, or vice versa. I don't know, but there's more interaction there. So I think it's a unique form of storytelling for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So it draws you out into this other world where like your volition matters. Like what you do, your will matters. In movies and books, your will doesn't have anything to do with it. Unless it's one of those like choose your own adventure, flip to a certain page or whatever.
Which is where like video games started too. So
that's a good point. Yeah. Okay, so it's more persuasive than other types of stories because you're making choices, you're living. Good. So when we look at that from a Christian perspective of like, how is that valuable as a Christian? Like me as a Christian playing video games, how does that benefit me? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it depends on what the video game ultimate objective is from the story. Like if the story is just a typical knight saves a princess and it teaches about like heroism, that's cool. But then if it's something like GTA where it's like you're just making all these immoral decisions to win is like part of the gangster squad against all of the policemen, like that's not super edifying or uplifting to us as believers. But then there's also like, it could be a story teaching about like sacrificing your life for somebody. And that ultimately becomes like the message of the game. And it's like, okay, well, that's actually something that's valuable for us to take away, thought provoking, and challenges us to like, would I do that in real life? Would I be willing to lay my life down like for somebody else? So I think a lot of it has to do with like, is those who created this game, are they doing anything that challenges me to be a better person, to be a better believer, things that line up with truths of scripture?
Okay, good. So it's more persuasive and that can draw you into like considering good realities within the game. They're like, any story will in some way reflect its author and reflect the values that they want to express. And if the game is reflecting like mercy or love or kindness or sacrifice or heroism, then we can look at that and say that there's value in knowing the story. I think this is the same sort of thing that gets us to like Tolkien or Lewis, like Narnia or Lord of the Rings, where it's in one way it's just really enjoyable because it's a good story, but in another way it's beneficial because it reflects Christian ideals, like whether the shape of the story, like in Narnia where we even see like Aslan, the god figure, crucified. Like the story itself parallels the crucifixion story and those sort of things, and expressing another story, or even just themes of heroism and sacrifice, whatever it may be. So there could be value there. That's good. That's helpful. Can you think of any maybe negatives that go along with that? Like the idea that video games are persuasive so they can persuade us of good things. What sort of persuasiveness can be negative as we play video games for the Christian, like morally thinking? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think video games can be so immersive, where we can role play in a sense of thinking, oh, what would I do if I was really this character in this game, for example. But we know instinctively that it's not real. So when we go around and I don't know, you're playing a game where you're like in the Old West or something and you rob a stagecoach or something, you're like, this is awesome, super fun. But like in real life, you're not going to do that. But is that then excusing certain immoral behavior because it's like just a video game, you know? Yeah, I guess that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's good. Like, so it's giving you volition, it's giving you will, but only so far. Like you're still on train tracks. You're still on rails. Yeah. Like whether it feels open world, feels like you can do whatever you want or not. Yeah. There still are railroad tracks, and the decision may end up being like kill someone or steal something. And it's hard to look at those sort of choices and say, you know, the Christian should be making such choices. This is good sort of storytelling, which is causing us to choose these things. That feels like it could be a pretty big negative. Is what do these choices that we make in this virtual world end up doing to us?
Yeah.
Like, in almost every case, it feels like we're talking about something subconscious.
Yeah.
Because it's not one-to-one. Like my willingness to rob a stagecoach in some video game is going to make me go out and rob a stagecoach in real life. Like,
right. Yeah.
That's certainly not it. But but what maybe is happening to us subconsciously as we make these decisions?
Yeah.
Could there be negatives there?
I think you could potentially, something that could happen with the context of the game type of games we're talking about, more like open world, you kind of make your own decisions, is it could lead the player to then in real life be like, well, I make decisions in video games, I have this freedom, so therefore I'm going to take that freedom into my real life of like, I'm the person who makes the final decision at the end of the day. Like,
Oh, good.
I'm the person that makes this. And coming from the video game context to the real world of like, yeah, I'm not going to like rob a stagecoach, but my character in the video game can do what he wants.
Yeah.
So why don't I just do what I want in real life? Like, I'll have that cookie before I eat my vegetables or whatever it is, you know?
Okay, so it makes you like the forger of your own destiny. Like I'm picking my path, and the more we make those sort of decisions of do whatever you want, with really the only consequences are maybe something in the virtual world that, I don't know, whatever it is on the video game, the more it will cause us to make similar type decisions in our own life of like, I'm just going to do whatever I want without consequences. That it may dull the consequence side of our decision making.
There has a potential to do that, I think, for sure.
Yeah. I think that's
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like another negative, I don't know if this is going down a rabbit trail, but like video games, going back to the immersion side of things too, like they can be so enticing, you know, just to explore this story. So many video games are geared toward, I mean, so many of them are like, click this little thing and then a shape like changes and you get rewarded on like Candy Crush or something.
Yeah,
It's just that constant like dopamine drip or whatever for completing levels. And then some games are just so like, so deep and nuanced in recreating life in some extent, like real life. So it's easy, I think, for people to then take that into a negative space because they'd rather be in a video game than being in real life, you know, interacting with real people or whatever. Because video games are controlled and there's only so much that can happen. It maybe doesn't feel as overwhelming, or it's just more desirable than your real life, you know, situation. So rather just jump into a video game than confronting whatever else is going on in your life. So those are potential negatives as well.
Yeah, that's really good. So I think there's two things there. One, in that video games are training us. So like this idea that it gives you a little dopamine hit that you accomplish something and now you can level up. And I think that's really good. We should talk about that later and both like pros and cons of this.
Yeah.
But this idea of like it being really immersive and almost brighter than our own world.
Yeah.
Like I talked to a lot of high schoolers that play a lot of fantasy games, and one of the reasons just seems to be like it's more exciting than real life. And every hour they spend in this world of dragons and open world or whatever it is, whatever's more exciting to them, makes our own world look a little bit paler. Like it makes it a little bit harder to live in the real world. There's this part in Inception. You guys have seen Inception? I'm sure film majors. I'm sure you've seen Inception.
Yeah.
But this moment, like where they're walking down into the guy who puts them in the dreams lab or whatever, and there's all these people dreaming, and he's like, "What are they doing?" He's like, "Oh, they pay. They come in every week and they pay us to go into dreams and like it's their reality."
Yeah.
And they're like, "That's crazy. Why would they do that?" And he's like, "Well, that's real to them. That's more real than this life." And there feels like there's a problem with that because I think as we watch that, us in reality are like, no, I think reality is more important than dream reality, right?
Yeah.
But there's this persuasive like it draws you in, it's captivating. There's something really dangerous about being drawn into something imagined. And I think like one of the ideas here of how it's different than movies and how it's different than books is the way you inhabit the world isn't inside your head. Like it's all outside your head. With books, yes, you're flipping through pages and you're reading, but the world that's being built is being built in your mind. That as you imagine the words on the page, and that can only go so far, but as we add like what you see and what you hear, and even now with video games, what you do, like your volition matters. There's this idea that this I feel like it's just pulling us in. Like it's pulling you into this other world. Which again makes it more persuasive.
Yeah.
Makes the whole world look a little bit dimmer. Makes everything else seem a little bit drier. Which is just something to I think to know on the front end of like how compelling and persuasive, and I don't know if it's you guys that I was talking to about this, were you guys the ones saying that like our video games now are the black and white version?
Yeah, it was us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the
Like
life.
what movies
It's something
used
like
to be.
if you compare the video game industry to the movie industry, it's relatively new. So comparing like side by side timelines, where video games are now are similar to where movies were in the silent era, which is like crazy because silent era black and white movies seem like so old.
Yeah.
But in that comparison, video games are so relatively new. It's hard to fully understand their like effect on society as a whole, on our minds.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And it's super weird. Yeah, I was just thinking about what you're saying. When you're reading a book, you're creating the world in your mind and interacting with it and imagining what people sound like and look like and all that stuff. But you don't have control over the story. You're just following it. Whereas a video game, it solves all those things for you. You see what people look like, what they sound like, music, the world. You're not interpreting any of that as different than what it's being presented as, but you're also making decisions in that. So your decisions affect the world, which, I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know how that affects people, but it does seem like it would be easier to detach in some ways from a book.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it lives in your head versus a video game. You get to participate in it more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in some ways, it definitely makes it more compelling, more persuasive, which becomes dangerous when you think about like who's making the video games.
Yeah.
Like for us as Christians, thinking about like good beneficial content. Like I brought up Narnia and Tolkien. Lewis and Tolkien. There's something safer about this because they're Christians with Christian convictions trying to reflect Christian principles.
Yeah.
But when we start holding up video games as like, this is a really good expression of sacrifice, in most cases, most developers of video games aren't seeking out good Christian themes. That, not to say that they're all worthless or they're all deceptive or they're all drawing us in a poor direction, but the proclivity for them to pull us in the wrong direction, I think, is more severe. Like it's more there. Yeah.
I think you're bringing up a really good point of like, it's actually, we're going to talk about a little bit on Wednesday with junior hires, is like, we have to have this critical view of how we view media because like we are being influenced by the people who are developing it. And so they're trying ultimately to persuade us in some sort of way. And so I think one thing to take away from what we're talking about at the very least is don't just flippantly go towards a video game or any sort of media and be like, oh yeah, like I'll just interact this without much critical thought. Like these people are trying to portray something to you. They're trying to get you to think in a certain way. A lot of times just geared towards that they want to make money. So they're going to try to keep you in their video game for longer. But when we come to video games, like having that question, is it like edifying? Is this going to uplift me? But yeah, and then the counter thing to that is, I do think though at the same time, there could be things made by non-Christians that could ultimately be beneficial and helpful. But if you're not viewing it with a critical eye, you're not going to catch that in the first place. So I think that's an important thing that you're bringing up.
Yeah. So that's good. So yeah, for example, I don't know, people bring up very controversial one in conservative Christian. Why can't Harry Potter? I don't know how that slipped my mind.
That's a good one. Yeah.
But like a lot of people hold it up and say it's really bad for some of its explicit themes of like wizardry and magic and some of these things. But other Christians hold it up as like, but there's some really good themes in here of like being chosen and redemption and even like giving your life and sacrifice. But so yes, like I think you're right that certainly unchristian authors can come up with really helpful and edifying themes.
Yeah.
But how much are kind of deceptive things leaking through as well? And I think because the medium is more persuasive, it becomes more dangerous. That like when we're interacting with a book, there's something less persuasive about words on a page. Like we have to get through a lot of media there, a lot of the medium to understand the plot and the themes and what's going on. With video games, it's kind of in the air. Like you're breathing in the realities that this author has set up.
So that's the sort of thing I differ a little bit though, is I think different audience members interact with mediums differently. So I think a book could be more persuasive to somebody versus the next person. Maybe video games is more persuasive. Because at the same time, any medium, anybody who's creating an art form that's telling a story is ultimately trying to persuade you of something. Like we talk about Tolkien, like Tolkien, I mentioned this, I think, in a previous conversation too, is like he's describing everything in extreme detail. Like he wants you to think about these characters exactly how he's thinking about them. He's wanting you to see the world exactly how he's seeing this world. And so just because it's not visually being shown to us because it's words, it's still it's still being communicated to us and how they want us to see it. And so I think if Tolkien's describing an ent and that it's like a tree, like being, and then in your mind you're like, well, I'm gonna see it as like a rock monster. Well, then you're not interacting with the medium well, and like two, like someone's gonna talk to you about like that book, and then they're gonna be like, what, rock monster? And that's just not how we read. Like when we read books or when we watch a movie, like we take it as it's being presented to us, unless we just misread something. And so I think that we should, like, the level of seriousness we're taking with video games, I mean, like even saying like we should have that with books. We should have that with movies. We should have that with these other mediums, music. We should have that with all of these art forms. Like there is a concern with all of these mediums. I think that, but
Okay.
yeah.
Let me rephrase it then, because maybe what I'm saying is video games can express more implicitly than books can. So these themes that books express explicitly, like what an ent looks like, it tells you exactly what the ent looks like, is pretty clear.
Yeah.
But a book's ability to express things implicitly, like without clearly stating it, with just kind of in creating an environment that draws you to get to that end.
Yeah.
Is so much harder to do than in video games.
Video games have the ability to have more control in that way, for sure.
And express things without you looking for them and seeking them out.
Yeah.
For example, like, and I just came to this, so poke holes in it if you'd like. But think about like a book about a soldier going to war and fighting, and I don't know, picture like maybe Saving Private Ryan as
That's a good point.
a book. And then think about that same thing, same story, but in video game media, what that looks like. I think comparing just the two stories, there's going to be far more killing in the video game story than there would be in the book. Because how many times are you going to describe someone getting shot and dying in a book as compared to the video game, where most of the action and the like pulling you in is you mowing down tens of people, if not hundreds of people at a time. You know what I'm saying? That there's more implicit communication, like subtle things happening that are going to express in the video game rather than in the book. And I think that's what I'm getting at is more dangerous. It's harder to be critical of the things that are just kind of in the air. Just if I killed 3,000 people in this Call of Duty episode or whatever.
Yeah.
It's harder to examine each of those and think critically about each of those rather than in the book where like one of the main characters dies and you've walked with them the whole time and you've seen in the story and you need to make a decision of whether this was right or wrong or whatever the author's drawing you into. It's easier to be critical when the media isn't so flashy and isn't so persuasive and isn't so action-packed as video games. I think that's what I was trying to get at.
Totally. Yeah. I would definitely
more common in video games.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that in a lot of ways because I think it depends on what the author's trying to communicate in the book. If he's trying to communicate or she is communicating the brutality of war and the amount of death that you'd see, like maybe that's what they write, or maybe there's I don't know how. It's a little maybe apples and oranges a little bit, but I think video games can also be helpful to understand the brutality of war. For example, there's a video game. I don't know if you guys played a Battlefield 1. I feel like you'd probably think I'm gonna go there. But
a Battlefield game. I don't know which.
Okay, it was like 2016 or 15 or something like that. But they had a little story mode, and it was like, it got me, like I had chills playing it, because in the beginning you're like rushing this enemy, trench line or something like that. Not to go too far down the rabbit trail of war video games, but anyway, the point is that you don't win. Like, you can die very easily, and every time you get killed, the screen goes black and it shows a name and a date range.
Oh, wow.
And it's, I don't know if they're real people from World War I, but they're basically saying, this is you and this is how old you were. And it's like, they're 19 years old or 20 years old or something like that, or 30 or whatever, 17, like so young. And then you spawn again and you're another soldier, you run, you get killed, and it has another name on there. So it's like, that like stuck with me. I was like, wow, it shows the brutality and the wastefulness of war for young men that are going to die. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. I don't know. I'm sure people have similar perspectives reading a book about the same topic.
There's something persuasive about that.
Yeah, but it's just, but that also weirdly combines reading and video games in the same way. I think there's a way that, like in all medium, like Kyle was saying too, books, movies, video games, where you can artfully and tastefully tell a story in a way that's super thought provoking, but also maybe helps you kind of snap out of your own reality and kind of be put into this new place, and then feel like so immersed in it that you can come away with some kind of newer understanding of something that, like from a book, you just can't experience anywhere near the reality of what that war was like. Whereas a video game, maybe it's getting a little bit closer. It's obviously not the same, but you can look around and see different things, hear the sound effects, the visuals.
Yeah. And that expressed a reality that caused you to think more of the soldiers that actually died. Just putting their names up there gave you a glimpse into, like, this is what it was like for them. That one of them jumped off a boat and ran 3 feet and then died.
Exactly.
That gives you more of appreciation for other people's sacrifice in a persuasive way. And that's compelling.
Yeah.
That's a good thought.
Yeah. But I think thinking about what you said and what you said, like, video games are very persuasive to most people, more so because they interact visually, like, with you. Like, they involve like reading, they involve like more like sound, like they involve so many different art forms. I think why movies made such an impact is because it involves so many different artistic abilities and talents and gifts to like come together as one thing. Like, to make a movie, you need people who are really good at designing a set. You need people who are good at costumes. You need people who are good at writing a good story. You need people who can act it out. All these different things.
And music and sound effects.
And then, like, I think that's why, like, movies, like, whoa, like, I'm engaging with more senses. And I think that's a huge reason why it's very persuasive for movies. But then add video games, take all of that, but now make it interactive. Now, like, you get to play a part in the story. Now, like, you're watching actors act it out, but now you're part of the cast. And so that adds another layer to the persuasiveness. And I think part of what you're getting at earlier, it's really important to think about is, like, we can get in this dangerous thought of, my life is just like so lame. Like this part that I'm playing in this world, like, I'm going to go play a character and care more about playing this character, this part, than the part that God's chosen me to play in reality. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So certainly video games are persuasive in just their form, like what they take, the way they mix volition and fantasy and story. They're going to cause us to feel certain ways and think certain ways. And where the Christian's job is, it sounds like, is to work hard to be critical about the way you're feeling and the way you're thinking. So if you're a believer thinking through, should I play a video game? I think there should come a time when you say, like, the story is the themes it expresses, the way it's persuading me are too negative. Like, they outweigh the good.
The persuasiveness of the media, I think, dictates that you would have an even stronger critical eye when you're viewing that media, from books to movies. And to Kyle's point as well, I think all those forms of media affect people differently. I don't know if objectively you can say video games are more persuasive, but if that's true to some extent, then that just means we need to be even more critical as Christians, seeking out, what the content of the game is, maybe other people's reviews of that or something like that, just so we know before we're getting into it. We're not just going in blindly. And then, as you guys have played video games, it's really easy to spend a lot of time playing them. So before you sink hours in, you kind of know what you're getting into a little bit,
Yeah, that's a good thing about knowing what you're getting into. Something that we kind of talked about previously and have talked about in other conversations is I think we have a lot of really cool nonprofits and different also Christian reviewers who look at explicit content when related to like video games, movies, whatever medium it is. And they talk about like, don't play this game or play this game because it has this amount of sexual content or has this amount of violence. But there isn't a lot of Christian conversations over what is like this teaching me morally. Like, how is this teaching me to, because sometimes it might not have any explicit violence, like that much explicit violence. It might not have that much explicit sexual content, maybe none of that at all. And yet at the end of the day, the message of the game is, but you're more important than everybody else. So just value that the most. And unfortunately, I've seen different ways Christians have interacted with those types of media and have praised those things. It's like, it's fine. It's totally okay. When it's like, okay, we need to look at both the explicit content, but also how is the truth of what this media is bringing to us affecting the truth that we believe as Christians.
That's good.
Do you have an example of a game like that? I just can't think of.
I feel like even I don't know if you're going to say something, but
I'm trying to think, but
like a Sims game. I haven't played any of those, so maybe I'm speaking out of turn. But they're marketed to be somewhat family friendly. Create your own life, do your own thing. You have free will. You're not going around shooting people with guns or something like that or fighting.
Yeah.
But maybe what it's teaching you is to live in the sinful pattern or seek after this thing that's ultimately the objective is money, for example, in the game. And it's like, okay, is that really what I want to be going after? And it's not going to show up in a rating of a video game that's, for mature, audiences or whatever. But will still just negatively affect us in the same ways that violence and sexual content might.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, there's so many games that glorify like greed and just making a lot of money and entrepreneurial.
Yeah,
that are not what we're called to live like.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's true.
Getting the highest score on Candy Crush. Like
exactly. Gluttony.
Like I'm just really harping on Candy Crush.
It's the medium of gluttony.
Yeah,
Candy Crush now. Okay, good. So I feel like that's a good transition into at least a conversation, because we've been talking mostly about story-driven video games.
Yeah.
But maybe correct me, but I think I'm right when I say story-driven video games are not the most popular video games in our culture.
I have no idea. But
I mean, if he said like 50% of games are mobile, most of those games are not story-driven. Right. And those are mostly made to be like endless kind of games loop that you keep playing. And then get to console games, it's kind of like, I would say a large portion of people focus more on that same thing. They focus more on multiplayer,
Fortnite, games. Call of Duty, multiplayer.
Yeah, and I think maybe part of maybe this is a little bit of a tangent too, but thinking critically about the intent of the video game developer and the studio behind it. If they're making a story-based game, the intent is for you to play the story, enjoy it, and you can literally go online. It'll say this is how long it'll take to play. 7 to 10 hours is like fairly average for a story-based game.
Yeah, non-open
so you
world
play,
game,
linear kind of thing. So you play it, you enjoy it, you get to the end. It's like watching a long movie that you're interacting with. That's fun. But if you're considering the intentions of these studios, their intention is to make a lot of money and please their shareholders. So if you only play 7 to 10 hours, then you stop playing the game, they don't get any more money from you and you're not interacting with their product anymore. So what's more beneficial for them? A product that you never cease to interact with. So is that an endless kind of game or whatever? So maybe just thinking through that lens of what these companies' end goal is. And then considering this free game you play, is it really free? Is it costing you something? Or is it slowly enticing you to keep coming back and have that feeling of dissatisfaction unless you come back to the game? So anyway, just consider like what the companies have.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's why we're seeing more and more of these endless loop games popping up.
Yeah.
That lack story. Like in most of them, there's just no story. Or I don't know, Call of Duty is one where they, Yeah, each game
new one
kind of knocks off story.
The story's now 3
Shorter
hours.
and
3 hour long story. That's great. And then, and it's never the main thing. Like,
Right.
and I think kind of how we think, one way to think about this in a Christian way is when we start taking the story out and we get to this kind of endless loop thing. Well, most of the positives that we just talked about could express good Christian themes which point us to God, or make us admire Jesus more. When we take out the story, we're taking all of that out and then replacing it with just kind of the form, the running around and shooting people with no story. There's something about that is something about the story being 7 hours long is good. It gives us a sense of, let's enjoy this good that God gave us for a time, and then we move on to the next thing and enjoy the next thing that God gave us. When we take that receptiveness away from it, when we make it an endless loop, which you can come back to over and over and over, forever and ever and ever, and we just keep putting more things in, we lose any sense of receptivity. When I say receptivity, I mean that as creatures, we are meant to understand God as the creator and the giver of all good gifts.
Yeah.
If we have anything that's good, it's because God gave it to us, not because we went out and got it ourselves, or we made it ourselves, or we created. No, we're creations who are meant to receive good from God. And the form of a 7 hour story or something finite keeps us in this posture of reception that we received this, we enjoyed it. And if I were to try to go get that pleasure again, it wouldn't be as pleasurable. Like the second time through, it's just not going to be as pleasurable. The third time through, it's going to be less pleasure. It's this kind of diminishing and waning. And I think that's something in us being human, which is really good to recognize that anything here isn't our home.
Yep.
Anything here isn't where we can find infinite good and infinite pleasure and infinite longings are filled.
Yeah.
That only in Jesus do we find our infinite good, and only in God do we find infinite pleasure. So in so much as everything that we receive is finite, it's helpful because it points to the infinite one. And so it's like Augustine saying, my heart is restless until it finds its rest in you, O God. Like any good that I have that's finite, it's just finite. And I'm going to be restless until I find my Savior and my God.
Yeah.
So just the fact that the story is limited is more human than this kind of unlimited thing that we do. And I think the unlimited thing is, I think there's pros and cons, and maybe I'll talk about the cons just quickly, and then maybe some more pros.
Yeah.
But when we take away all these limits and we find in it pleasure unending, like I can play this. I have students who play their video games for 3,000 hours. One video game for 3,000 hours. We are creating for ourselves a God. Like this is the thing I go to when I need pleasure. This is the thing I go to when I want to turn my brain off. This is the thing I go to when I want to relax. And I think these things are far easier to become idolatrous than the lived reality of a soccer game. Like you spend the 40 minutes and you run around and kick a ball and it's pleasurable, but the 40 minutes are going to come up at some point. The endless loop I think that has a way of drawing us in and captivating us that could be pretty negative.
Yeah, it's much harder to end that. I was thinking about a game I've been playing that's, you go to these planets and you kill a bunch of aliens and that's it. That's the whole thing. It's like total dude game. You're just like, let's go, defend these planets, whatever. Very fun, but they have time limits on the game. So I was thinking of soccer as you were talking. I was like, counterpoint is soccer. You play one game. You're not like, I'm done with playing soccer. I'm never going to play it again. You're out there the next Tuesday playing.
Yeah.
But maybe the goal or the takeaway is how well you did, the time that you had with your friends playing or the people that you're playing with or whatever. In a similar way, I think that can be similar in video games where the form and the content are the same, but you come back to it over and over again and they are somewhat endless. But then you can focus on playing online with friends, for example. I found that in my own life, connecting with friends that I don't live close by to. It's a great way to stay connected. It's almost like, especially for guys, I don't want to speak too generally here, but I don't know how many guys just phone call and FaceTime each other just to be like, hey, how's your day going? You know, how are you doing? It's if you can do something together, it's a lot easier for guys to connect in a lot of ways. So playing that online game where you can be like, hey, how's life going? Whatever, as you're doing something else can be helpful. But there is like an end to that. You know, there's a natural end of like, oh, one more game or whatever. And then once it's done, you go to sleep or whatever. I don't know, whenever you're playing, but there's other endless games that like, it's really hard to like force yourself to be like, I'm going to stop now, you know, and turn it off and go to sleep and not spend 3,000 hours playing it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And even soccer, you have your 40 minutes, the game is over and everyone disperses.
Yeah.
Online video games, you play your 40 minutes with your friends and they want to log off, but
So there's, you want to play
there's
again,
tens of thousands of people playing that you could just jump in with. And like
you could theoretically like never
on the
stop
small
playing.
scale. Yeah. It never stops.
And
It could never stop.
Yeah, soccer, you're physically getting exhausted. Your body can only go so far.
Yeah.
Which is like you eventually got to sleep for video games too, but it's a lot easier to keep going. Whereas soccer, like,
and even with soccer, like even on the wider scale rhythm, you got like maybe 40 years of soccer playing tops. I don't know. I met people that, you know what I mean? Like it's hard to make it your ultimate thing when your body's just not going to let you at some point. Video games, on the other hand, like you could play video games every day for the rest of your life if you desired.
And the physical, you know, benefits you get from playing soccer are much better than the physical benefits from playing video games.
Yeah, and with this like time frame is the idea of if it's a good from God and is to be received, there should be limits on it. There's a time, for example, God gave me the good gift of golf, right? Like I enjoy golf and it should be enjoyed with limits. Like I shouldn't be playing Trump International, paying $600 every day.
Yeah.
I've never played it, so don't think less of it. But, or I shouldn't be going 3 rounds a day and neglecting my family.
Yeah.
So like there has to be limits.
Yeah, boundaries.
God he gave me the gift of golf, but he also gave me the gift of fatherhood. And if I'm neglecting fatherhood for the sake of golf, like I'm living in sin and I'm doing the wrong thing. And I think one classic example is I think I felt it in high school, and I know all my high schoolers are feeling it, of the draw of video games instead of the other goods that God has given you, one being school and one being like your homework. No kid sees homework as a God-given good, but it is. It is. It's the way that he gave us to train in our intellect so that we can be productive members of society or whatever it is. But every teenager will choose video games over homework as long as they have the choice to do it. Now, I can't say every, but in most I remember feeling this tension.
Something that we should prioritize lesser than homework.
Good.
For sure.
So I remember this tension of like, I have homework to do, but Skyrim is sitting there. So which one am I going to do? And too often I made the wrong choice.
Yeah.
The limitless nature of it, that I can just log on and do it whenever I want and play whenever I want, is really dangerous in that it takes away from many of these other goods that we need to experience and need to give ourselves to that aren't as persuasive or aren't as compelling. So its persuasiveness along with its infiniteness draws us into this, like, we just make it God rather than the goods that God has given us to beforehand.
Yeah, totally. I think it also provides an opportunity maybe to practice self-control and, setting time limits and healthy boundaries with video games. I recognize that's so much harder to do when you're, high school, junior high age or whatever. I don't think I was ever thinking about like, I'm going to play video games for 1 hour or something. But I think that's a good point. And also just to be diligent and kind of checking in with yourself and how your own mind and heart are doing with certain things. I know even outside of high school, later after college, playing a game and then just be thinking about it like all day long, be like, oh, I really want to do this thing. And I wonder if that could work, whatever. And I'm like, I'm not even focusing on what it's like right in front of me that I should be focusing on. Well, that's interesting. Maybe I should, not play it as much or just consider its impact on my life, that there's not many other things in life that are that engrossing,
I had that experience in high school. It's like our family first got an Xbox 360 and we got Halo, and we just played it like multiplayer with our family constantly, and it was really fun. And then I remember one night going to bed, laying in bed, and just thinking about Halo and being like, I should pray. and I'd start to pray, and then my mind would drift back to Halo. And over the course of like 20 minutes before I fell asleep, I tried maybe 10 times to get my mind off of it.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't.
Yeah.
And it was like this really eerie and uncomfortable feeling of like, okay, I guess this is what addiction is. Like after that night, I was like, I'm not gonna play Halo for a week. Like, this is scary.
Yeah.
But how much? Yeah, I think that happens a lot. It has this ability to draw us into.
And sadly, I don't think. Well, I don't want to speak too generally, but I think a lot of people don't have that sensitivity to even realize this is maybe not how I should be spending my time, or this is weird that I'm thinking about this and I can't even just focus on sleeping or praying or something like that. And to notice that there's something wrong there, instead of just being like, oh, well, I must really like that game. I'm gonna stay up late and play it, or play it the soonest I can, as soon as I get home from school or off of work or whatever. But I think I think we can pray about that and lift that up to God to give us that sensitivity back towards whatever medium that we're enthralled in.
I think it's getting at something like really deep within us of like, it says in the last days we'll be seekers of pleasure. And like, I think it's very easy for us to seek the things of the world to find our pleasure. And then when that thing starts to fade away, we're like off to the next thing that's about to like grab our attention and satisfy us. And then I think great book for especially, I figure like probably younger people are going to watch this. So a great book for them to read would be Desiring God. Just like, yes, you should seek pleasure, but seek it through Jesus, seek it through him first. And I think that's something for a long time for me too. Like I had moments like that too, whether it was Halo or another game or something entirely different. I've had it with board games. There was a season in high school, we played this board game called Bang, which amazing board game.
Super fun. Yeah.
So fun. But like my friend group and I, we'd play it like maybe every time we hung out, and we hung out at least twice a week. And there were nights where I'd be thinking about, okay, the next time I get to play as that character, what am I going to do? And I'm like, Kyle, like talking to myself, like, you're thinking about this more. You're thinking about Christ. And I'm like, that's bad. And so I think like really like looking and examining your life and saying, okay, really where am I getting my pleasure from? Am I getting pleasure from just like when I'm off of work, the first thing I go to, is it like just to the video games? Or is if when I'm done with school, like I go to video games first because that's like how I escape the stress, the anxiety, the different things that are going on. And then when it starts to become your escape, well, that's when you start to excuse all of the boundaries that you may have set.
That's good.
And you're like, this is where I'm getting my fulfillment from. And because it's where I'm getting my fulfillment from, now, well, I'm just going to let it take me. And it so easily slips. So I think we need to be like just good stewards to our youth and being like, hey, like your fulfillment is going to come with your heart relationship with the Lord. And like, that's where you got to seek it first. And if you're not getting it there, like, you need to start seeking the Lord and with that. Yeah.
To put it another way, I think it's a lot like that. The whole being human and trusting God is this process of learning to live with both enjoyment and renunciation. So this idea of like,
yes,
to receive good gifts from God is we ought to enjoy them, but we ought to also say there are ways that I could enjoy this, it's wrong, that I shouldn't enjoy this in this way. And with any good we're given, we have the ability as humans, like we're inclined to make them idols and to make them the primary thing rather than seeing them as a gift from God. So one of the big challenges, and there's no simple answer to it as Christians, is to learn to live enjoying God's gifts, but also renouncing certain things at certain times. And it's this tension of if we're always just saying, no, it's all to be enjoyed, we're living poorly.
Yep.
But also, if we're always saying, no, it's to be renounced, we're also missing out on the good things that God is giving us. So that's one with self-examination, and I think community, asking brothers and sisters for help and be willing to grow and learn to enjoy the gifts God has given you on his time frame and within limits, and learn when you need to say no to certain gifts as well. Maybe we could touch on two more things. And I think it's actually one of the benefits of what these endless loop video games do. And I did not think this until I talked to a friend who thinks really well about things, and he expressed this. video games that you play on an endless loop are mentors. Like they are training you to think a certain way and to be able to do certain things. Like Fortnite itself is a school teacher. Like the game itself teaches you how to be better at Fortnite.
Yep. Yeah.
The video game's ability to teach you is a helpful tool in teaching students that they can learn and teaching students how to train. And here's what I'm getting at. Like, so many high schoolers I run into feel like school's overwhelming and they can't succeed. Like, I have D's and that's the best I can do. Like, I can't figure out how to learn the information. Yeah. Well, when we ask them, like, how many hours, like, what's your favorite video game? Oh, well, it's this. How many hours have you played? Well, it's this. When you first started Fortnite, were you good at Fortnite? No.
Yeah.
Well, how'd you get better? Well, I spent 3,000 hours. Well, you haven't spent 3,000 hours on school. How have you spent 3,000 hours on that? Well, it's fun. And the way that it draws you in and gives you dopamine, right? Like it's training you to play the game and is making you willing to sit in front of it for 3,000 hours. It's doing something that is causing you to learn. And I think what it can prove to students is like, look, you can learn. Yeah. Like you've learned Fortnite so well that you could demolish me every single time I pick up the controller. Yeah. So you just need to learn how to learn in other ways. Like your school, if you use some of the tactics and some of the things that Fortnite does to draw you in and get you willing to spend 3,000 hours there, if you can find ways to treat your school in a similar way, you can learn this. Like you're capable of it.
Yeah.
And in fact, like maybe even the game has made them better decision makers, and the game has made them better under pressure and better in tight situations. That yes, we certainly need to like reorient that skill, but it is a skill, and like perhaps they are training in this.
So you're saying we need to make homework as fun as video games?
We need to learn to make our brains see homework as fun as video games.
Yeah, I think you bring up something really interesting. Is like thinking about like schoolwork and all of these different things of like homework and how teachers teach. I think, how the teachers present it matters. But if they're doing a poor job, which like, maybe the teacher doesn't like what they do, they're not very like exciting. But there's like YouTube University. The YouTube has like pretty much every single subject on there, of every single grade. If you don't like think the Spanish class you're taking is very fun, like there's other ways to help you with learning Spanish online that can be interesting and enjoyable, even add some entertainment value while you learn. Maybe amongst your friends, like create something about like, hey, like if we get this much work done, this person like does this well, maybe this person gets this thing, or we can accomplish this thing. Like creating things that entice you to have motivation or a goal at the end, or finding avenues outside of school that help you study that are exciting to learn, can actually like really help propel you, because like that's what video games are doing with their video games. They're like, oh, like keep playing to get this skin or whatever. Or do this so you can get this ability.
That's good. And
so it's like, okay, maybe your school isn't doing that for you, but maybe you can do that for yourself, or maybe you can have people help you do that. That's what tutors like are really good at doing. They're good at making like school, like what you thought was so dull and stale and boring is now as sharp as a knife. You're like, this is actually a lot cooler than I thought it was.
So that's good.
Yeah, and I think we should be careful. Don't video gameize your whole life. Like, don't make everything that you do. Yeah. Well, I got to level up, and I gotta. But it could be. It's helpful in some ways. Like I have a friend who he reads more on his Kindle than in a real book, and he's trying to figure out why. And he's concluded like it's because the Kindle puts the percentage that I'm done in the corner. Yeah, and it says like you're 63% done, and I'm like, well, I could get it to 100, which is just different than if you have a paper book in front of you
or something going through.
Yeah, like it's more. There's something more real when I went from 62 to 63%. Then I just flipped a page. That's a video game idea of like leveling up or completing or whatever it is.
That's the way it is with audiobooks for me. Like I'll be going through audiobook and it's faster for me because I'll see like, oh, I'm at like 30% now, and then I'll listen to a little bit more, just a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm at like,
only an hour left.
I'm
I can
50%.
do that.
Like, sweet,
Knock
yeah.
out this last hour.
Yeah.
I think it says something too about like the community that you surround yourself with, because when you're learning a new skill, there's oftentimes you find yourself in that community, and there's always people who know more than you. And then the more you learn, the more you can glean from the people who know more. You can teach other people who don't know as much, and you can, in a sense, kind of gauge where your skill level is at in a percentage almost, based on how much you know. So just as a piece of advice to people out there who want to focus on school and studies and whatever, make sure your community is also focused around the same thing. Yeah. And the same way you're playing video games and you're like, you want to play Fortnite with other people who are good at Fortnite. You don't want to just play with people who are bad or aren't getting better at the game or something like that. So you seek after people who are good and play with them, and you learn more about how to play. Same thing with, learning a new skill or school or something like that. But I think you have a really good point, though, that video games kind of can show that you are capable of curiosity and of learning and developing and growing a skill, just in the same way that studying and homework is a skill. Even though I think we can objectively agree that video games are more fun than homework.
That is true. but to make this like all distinctly Christian, Christian life requires training. And in 2 Timothy 3:16, all scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness. Mm-hmm. Like the Christian life, if we are to give ourselves to God's word, is to train in righteousness.
Yeah.
And so training like and growing is something that we're going to have to do. So giving ourselves to being better at it is very core to following Jesus.
Yeah.
The Christian faith is a daily thing, is take up your cross and follow me. We have to do that every day of our life. And that requires training and growing. Yeah. And that whole picture is like you're learning to do it. You're growing in it. You're walking after him. So yeah, just video games is like a framework for, look, you can grow and you can be trained.
Yeah.
You just got to do it the right way. Yeah. Yes, it's going to be harder, but you are capable of it.
Yeah.
Could be a good thing for students.
And there are I was thinking about a game, there's achievements, and I think most people can recognize that achievements in games are ultimately worthless. Like they don't mean anything. They only mean something in that game, in that context, or around other people who play the same game. You're like, I'm this level and they're this level, whatever. But when you acquire skills in real life and you read the word and you grow your relationship with Christ, these are achievements and things that will not only last in this life, but into eternity. They're the most meaningful things that we can attain. So while video game achievements are cool, they're so fleeting. And as soon as you find that next game, you're going to look back and think about that old game that you were really good at and totally forget about it. Like they don't mean anything. So try to seek after the things that actually have impact in this life and in eternity.
Yeah. How much time do we have? One
go for it.
I want to say. Okay, cool. Yeah. Like speaking of if you value those achievements too much and that becomes your core value, then that can lead to how your character is when you interact with other people in games, or you're interacting with other people, like the endless time of games. And you talk about taking up your cross, one thing to also think about, we haven't talked about much, is how are we going to interact with the other people we're playing video games with? Most of those people, they're not acting like Christians, especially in these games we've been focusing more on with shooter games. But if you're playing with people in Minecraft or Stardew Valley, whatever it is, any of these games, are you acting like you are in reality? When you're out at school or with your family and maybe you're behaving like you would in a Christian context, are you doing that when you're online? Are you representing Christ? Or do the achievements of you being the best guy over everybody else, yeah, I'm so good, I stomped you, you suck. Is that really edifying to the people you're around? Because how you conduct yourself on video games really matters. There's just stories of people during COVID, people sharing Jesus in video games and people actually coming to Christ or reading the Bible for the first time. I was playing an online video game once, and I have a lifelong friend now that I've been able to share the gospel with, and he's read through John. He started reading through Acts, and we talk about the Christian faith, and a guy who comes from a more Indian background. So these things matter. And I think sometimes we get in this mindset of how I interact online doesn't really matter, but how we act matters in every corner of every area of our life with other people. So Yeah, like we may not want to play with the worst people in Fortnite, but maybe we do play with them because we care about their soul and we want to share like who Jesus is with them. And maybe the Lord grants us that opportunity to do that. Not that that's like the greatest form of evangelism ever, but the Lord can use it. But within the boundaries that we talked about, and that we're not
Good.
3,000 hours in.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation with you guys talking about video games. We hope that you got something out of it too, and that maybe it changed your perspective on how you look at media, how you look at video games. If you have a question that you would like to ask, you can email us at ask@rhcc.net. And thank you for joining us.